Okay, we've got everything ready to go. Your crib vamps have already dried, so we'll go ahead and pull them off the board. I've got all the top patterns stitched, and we'll assemble the boot just ready for closing, or that's sewing the two halves together, and get that part done in this segment for you. This is probably one of the more critical parts of assembly of your boot. If you don't get this right, the boot doesn't set right. It leans back, it leans forward. So you're going to want to pay particular attention to this portion.
You might mention that it's dried for about a day.
Yeah, it takes a day, 2 days, depending on the weight of the leather, how humid it is. Okay, there's one of your vamps. Starting to look like a cowboy boot already, isn't it? Here's one of the lasts. If you set it over your last and place this seam here about across the middle instep, you get some idea about where everything's going to go. It's at this time that I normally sew on my wingtips. If I'm putting like a lizard wingtip on, I usually sew it on about now. I find it a lot easier to place my wingtip in relation to the toe now than when they're laid flat. Pull this one. We'll also show you how to accommodate a higher heel and a lower heel. There's your linings. So we're ready to go there. Your heel height is directly related to this point here, this curve here. If you were going to go to a taller heel, you're going to want this toe to drop down a little bit, like this. So you're going to want to down and take about 1/8 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch off of this point right here to accomplish that. If you cut this point here, your fastening point here is going to remain the same, but it's going to allow your toe to drop down like this. So this is something to keep in mind if you were going to make a very radical heel. If you're going to go from, say, 1 1/4 inch, 1.5 inch heel up to about a 2.5 inch heel or a 2 inch heel, you're going to have to trim a little bit off here. I trim approximately 1/8 of an inch off here if I'm going to make a 2 inch heel. And that just start about here and come down about 1/8 of an inch. That's really all there is to it. Alright, we've got all 4 of our tops ready to go. This is where this line that I was telling you about here, this 1/2 inch line, is going to come into play. First thing we're going to do is put the counter on. So take both of your backs and lay them down. The easiest way to do this is to take and go up on your center line and split it up about 1/2 inch. I'll show you here. Like so.
And you need to put that over the white or something.
Okay. This allows you to take this V that you've cut in the bottom and spread it out so it's flat. You're building the cup in the top of the boot. So we've got that one done. Alright, then I take my counters and I go down approximately 3/8 of an inch and draw a line across, and I mark the center again. Just a lot of like the center that I've marked is just visual. You don't have to be exact on it. I'll do the other one here. You don't go quite to the 1/2 inch mark so that you aren't running over this counter every time you have to sew your counter cover on. Makes for a little easier sewing. Okay, I've got them both ready to go here. So we take and put some contact cement on the inside, barge again or something, XL8, just on the bottom, up approximately that 3/8 again. These counter covers run a little high in the center, so you're going to have to run a little bit more cement on them. Okay, while they are drying, glue your counters the same way on the flesh side. You want the smooth side, or the side that you've ground the hard finish off, to the inside of their foot. So you glue it like this. While this is drying, we'll take and lay out the fronts, the vamp. Again, using your center line that you drew. If you come down approximately 6 inches on the front from the cut in your scallop, let's see if I put it like this, maybe. From this point right here, measure down approximately 6 inches on your fronts. This is going to give you a locating point for the top of your tongue pattern. Now this varies 1/8 of an inch or so depending on how much stretch your leather had. But this is where you're going to place the top of your tongue right here. Gives you a starting point. Take one of your vamps, lay it out on your top, come down to your 1/2 inch marks that we were talking about, and see where you come up with measurement wise. You'll be within 1/8 of an inch of it. Okay, just check it that way. Now we're going to take a little rubber cement.
Why don't you go over the dimension again? That's a little quick, I think.
The 6 inch dimension?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to measure 6 inches down from the deep cut of your scallop. Now if you were to take and make a deeper scallop on this measurement's going to change. If you cut this scallop down to another inch deeper, another 2 inches deeper, you're going to have to accommodate this mark again. So be aware of the fact that it's constant 6 inch with these patterns. Another thing you're going to want to do before we put the vamp on it is skive your bottom of your front of your boot top. I do it on the inside, and I take again about 3/8 of an inch. You don't want to go much more than that, because when you sew your lining, you want your skiving to be covered by your lining. So I come on the inside and I skive this area here. I still do this by hand. I find it a little easier to do than to go over and try and set up my skiver for this double leather thickness. There's no reason why a mechanical skiver wouldn't do this. Just that I find this a little bit quicker than changing everything on that skiver. We'll skive both of them here. This makes for an easier fit, easier to get the boot on. They aren't going to tear up the front of their foot, the instep of their foot, to get your boot on and off. Again, it's something they're paying for. It doesn't take that long to do this. Acme and the rest of them don't even skive this leather anymore, and we get boots in all the time where they complain of the top of their foot being rubbed raw every time they pull a boot on raw. This is it right here. And when it folds around like it's going to and opens up, you've got a nice smooth passage for your foot to slide in and out. Do the other one here. By the time you're done with this, the counters are about ready to go, so it doesn't, you don't end up with much wasted time when you're making a pair. I've always found it more profitable to make more than one pair at a time, because you usually end up with waiting time for your vamp to dry, your crimped vamps to dry, your last to dry when it's wrapped. And if you've got more than one pair, you've got something to do. You can always start on the next pair. Okay, there's the other one. And again, like I said, when you fold them around like this opening has a tendency to spread, and you're basically looking for a smooth shot for the foot to get in and out. Now we can place your counters. This is going to be the hardest part to show you. You're going to spread your counter straight. This V that you've got notched in the bottom of your counter, you're going to want to put on this line, and you're going to want to straighten that V out. You're going to kind of buckle the top a little bit. I'll do one here, give you an idea what we're talking about. So you can see that she's lacking by about a ½ inch on each side now. Take it and just spread your crow's foot apart that you made. Put your center cut on the center line again. Okay. You notice your top is puckered a little bit now. Like so. If you were to fold your top in like this, you would straighten it out to the point where you could see what's happening on it. So there's one right there.
Let me see that one longer.
Okay.
Okay.
Do the same with the other one. Again, spread this out like this. Now, from this point on the counters, I take them over and I run them on my finisher. I sand this area here off. I sand this down so that I don't have a bump on my counter when I last the boot, because this is going to protrude out a little bit. So I take and I sand this seam down. The critical part about doing that is remember that you're going to have only approximately ½ inch covered here with your heel counter, like this. So remember, don't sand anything above that, because you're gonna ruin your boot top. It'll be visible. I'll go over and sand these down here, and then I'll come back and show you what I've done. Okay, as you can see, I've skived this down, and I do it on the finisher. It does a much better job than I can by hand here, and this seam will show up. So you're going to want to taper it out. But if you noticed, I've stayed below that ½ inch that I was talking about. Now, I take and I just wetten the inside of the counter down with just water. Because you're using such heavy leather, it makes sewing of the counter a little easier. We'll go over and we'll sew these counters now, and I sew them good. I put 4 or 5 rows of stitching on my counters. If you're in the repair trade at all, one thing that you keep sewing over and over and over are counters on cowboy boots. So I give them a little extra attention. This is also one of the reasons I set up this machine, just for this job and one other, so that I can set up a heavier thread and use it just for this job. Once the leather is wet, it sews relatively easy. You wouldn't have any trouble doing this on your patcher if you run, sew your counters on your patcher. I just busted some thread. the way I have that 3115 set up, it wouldn't sew these counters. They're stout, and it takes a pretty good machine to do it. But I want to run a little bit heavier thread when I'm sewing the counters, so I feel it's worth the extra money to have a machine set up to do it. Again, cut off your thread so you aren't running over it. Just gives you a bigger mess that you have to clean up later. This is one area that you don't have to worry too much about your stitches because they're all going to be covered up. And again, if you just run to the next one, it saves you holding on to the end of the thread. You don't have as much waste. Take and fold your top over sometimes. I just double them over like this. I don't have to worry about hitting the end of my machine. And sometimes if you're doing a decorative stitch, that can happen at the worst times. And then it's too late. You've already sewed off the vamp or something that you really didn't want to do. So you can fold your top over and give you a little more working room. Okay. From here, we go back to our pounding block and we flatten out all these, pound down all these stitches. Makes for a little smoother surface against his foot. Okay, we've got our counters sewed. Now we'll put the outside covers on. As I said before, your front pattern is going to go down approximately 6 inches. Your back pattern is going to go down approximately 6.5 inches. So that you'll want to mark out now. It's another thing you'll find this silver layout pen works very well for is this type of stuff, because it does clean up very easy. Okay, we'll put our outside covers on. I use rubber cement for this because it's easier to clean up afterwards. And you go down to your 1/2 inch mark.
Now you just glue those along the top edge, you don't glue them all over.
Right, yeah, you don't go down in this area and glue them. Just the area you're basically going to be stitching in. And again, I'll use a magazine to glue these on. I'm going to do the vamps last because they're a little tricky. We'll spend a little time showing you what's going on with them. Counter really isn't that big of a problem. Just takes a second for that to dry. The bellows on your vamp, this ballooned out area here is very critical. When you lay it down on your top, I'll just do it this way so you get some color clash. You don't want to. I'll do it this way. You don't want to stretch this flat. You don't want to take all this bellows out that you put in on the crimping board. When you lay your tongue pattern down, you don't want to stretch it flat completely. You want to just get enough of an area down, approximately 1/4 of an inch here, about that thickness there, that you're going to sew on. The rest you want ballooned out. You want it sticking out away from your vamp. You want it out this way. So keep that in mind when we put it together. So gives you some idea of what we're doing. It all has to do with the way the boot fits when you put it on the last. These are ready to dry now. You ready to put together? Okay, you can take and fold your tops down like this. I just kind of draw them down like that and leave them lay flat. If your counter's flat, the top will flare out. If you take your counter cover and stick it between your fingers like this and just kind of bend it. I stick my middle finger down under the cover, the other two on top. And it makes for lining up a little easier because you're kind of putting a pocket in it. Once you get the front positioned, you can let the back go. Once you get the tongue positioned, I should say, you can let the sides go a little bit.
You line the tongue up right on that mark you put on there. That's your...
The 6.5 inch mark, right. Okay. See this little bit of a pocket we've got right here? You want that in there. It varies from leather to leather, but you want a little bit of a pocket right here. That one we've got ready to sew. Notice when I draw the counter down flat how the top comes up. You have no bellows of any kind on your counter as you have on the front. As far as the tongue pattern itself buckling here, this lays pretty flat, but you do end up with a little bit of a bellows down at the bottom down here. So there our back covers are ready to sew. Now we'll put the tongues on. We've already marked them the 6 inches down that I was explaining to you. 6 inches from this front scallop down. So we'll take and put some rubber cement again, just on the area you're really planning on sewing. That 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay. Spread your vamp out. Glue it. One of the reasons again we're using rubber cement is simply because this is a little messy and you can't help but get a little bit of cement on the outside covers. So if you use rubber cement, it's something you can clean up later. These particular boots, I'm not going to change this angle on any because the heel height is very compatible with what we've got here. There we go. Now just as quick as these dry, we'll put them together. I'll explain partially what we're going to do. The first thing you're going to do is want to place the top of your tongue pattern here. Then you're going to want to bring both your sides down to your 1/2 inch mark again here. And you're going to want to do it so that the tongue is standing straight out from the top, as straight as you can without having it lean one way or another this way on it. You want it straight up and down. But you're again not going to want to flatten the bellows of the tongue out in this area right here. That I'll show you here when I put her on. Okay, first we're going to take and place the top of the tongue on the 6-inch mark. Then let the rest go. Come down and bring your side seam down to that 1/2 inch mark. Yep, we're going to have to do her flat. Alright, the 6-inch mark again. Now we come down to our 1/2 inch mark. And our 1/2 inch mark on this side. Okay, we've got her positioned here, here, and again on this side. Now come down and just lightly press in from the inside and bend your finger out this way. Bend those fingers out that you've got here. These here, you want to bend them out this direction. And bring them to your vamp. Don't bring your vamp to them. Same with this side. Like so. Reach in here and fold it out. Okay, we've kind of formed a pocket here for it to see how you're. Can we pick up on how this is curved in?
Now, if you turn it sideways, we might.
Like so.
A little more. Yeah.
Okay, see this? We've actually taken the top and curved it into the vamp this way. This is pretty critical for you to get a good fit on it. Bring your top out to meet your vamp. Don't squash your vamp down flat to meet your top. Bend your top up.
Let's show us the front of it.
Okay, you'll notice that she's standing out fairly straight from the top. If I turn it this way, this is the center line right here, right there. So, this way?
Yeah. That's good.
Okay. Now we're going to do the same thing with this one. Then we place our tongue medallion at the 6-inch mark. And we're going to bring our 1/2 inch marks down. You lift the top pattern up and bring the top to the vamp. Just stick your finger down there and push it out. Same with this side. Okay, we're ready to start sewing. I'm going to sew one of these vamps on this flatbed machine just more or less to show you that it can be done. But as you can see, you're going to have to keep bending your toe down to get clearance. But I'll sew one on here to give you an idea that it can be done. And then we're going to move over to the post machine, and I'll do the other one on the post machine. I think by the time I get done sewing on the post machine, you'll see why it's such a handy tool. It just makes it much, much easier. So we'll go ahead and sew this one on this one. On this machine, I mean. Your first seam you're going to want as close to the edge of your leather as you can get. You also have to take and fold your top down now so that it'll clear under your roller foot. This is again why you're going to want a large roller foot on your flatbed machines, because if you're going to do most of your sewing on a flatbed, you want all the clearance you can get. By the time you get to the second side of it, you can take and pull the side of your top up and lay your tongue a little bit flatter like this. That helps a little bit. And we'll have to fold your top over. First row isn't too bad on a flatbed. When you get to the second and third row, especially up around your tongue, in this area here, you get pretty constricted. It gets pretty tight. We sew only one row on the vamp to start with. After we get this other row sewed on the post machine, we're going to put the lining in. So you only sew the one row to start with. So I'll go over to the post machine and sew the other one for you. Okay, we'll sew this vamp on the post machine to give you an idea of difference. Again, the idea behind a post machine is simply this. As you sew, everything droops away from you. So the area that you're working on is predominant, sticking up. Anyway, the top falls away all by itself. This is in sharp contrast to what I had to put up with on the flatbed machine. I don't have to fight with this. It falls away all by itself. Again, from here I would sew right onto my counter covers. Then also you would sew as close to the top edge as you can for your first seam. And we'll go to the next one. Okay, we'll stop on this one till we get our linings in our tops. That way I can follow through with all three seams. So from here we'll go back over to the layout table and put our linings in. Here we place our linings. You'll notice the fit is almost a natural. You want to take the lining while it's squeezed together like this and place it as deep into the tongue pattern as you can put it. You don't want any space between your lining and the tongue pattern. You're going to have to slide your lining up or down to give you the most amount of lining here, but yet be able to be caught when we sew it. Okay. Again, I use rubber cement. When you cement the inside, you've already got one line to cement to, so you don't have to smear any cement past that line.
This is the seam line of the vamp.
The first line that you sewed, yes. So you can smear cement just inside that. It makes for a cleaner inside of your boot when you're done. It kind of gives you a line to draw to. And again, if you skive properly, none of your skiving is going to show past the lining. Use our magazine again and spread out our vamp lining in this manner. glue around it. This is a pretty slick way to put your lining in because you don't have to be terribly accurate with your sewing because you're going to trim off the excess later. So it makes for kind of a forgiving way to do it. You could cut your vamp lining on the same pattern that you cut your outside vamp on, but you've got to be a lot more accurate as to where you place it. We'll let these dry a minute. There are several different ways you can stitch your tops when you're sewing your vamp stitching. Now we have one row of stitching on all 4 of our pieces now. You can take and put 3 rows of stitching very close together on it and call that fine. You can put 4, 5, as many as you want. I usually run about 3. You can run 2 very close together and drop down about 1/4 of an inch and run your 3rd row. Your roller foot will mark that out automatically for you if you care to do that. Some boot makers will come down to the front edge of their vamp and sew down this way, approximately 1 inch in from the edge. They feel that's a mark of quality. Personal taste. You can come up and sew any type of a decorative stitch on the tongue pattern that you care to. You've seen all different types of boot stitch patterns in this area. I like to run 3 rows of stitching close together. I think it looks finer. Everybody does it different. Okay, again, we're going to slide it right inside the other one, like so. And make sure that our tongue patterns are flush. We don't have any air in between them. I'll show you when I get done here. Okay, here's the top of my boot. I stick my hand right inside it and I make sure that I've got all the air taken out between the two. So there's no bubble between the lining and the vamp itself. Okay, we've got one ready to sew here. Same with this one. Again, take and run your hand inside and get it formed nice and flat. Now we're ready to sew our linings.
You want to make sure that the sides of your lining is out above the seam line of the vamp where you sewed it the first time.
So that you're above it, yes. So when you sew the second seam on the outside, which will be your first seam on your lining, it will be below the first seam that you sewed. We'll go over here and sew these. I'll show you when I get this one done what the inside's going to look like. Now, we've put our second row of stitching on the outside, but it's our first row of stitching on the lining itself. Now we'll go ahead and put the rest of the stitching on.
can do this on your flatbed. Don't be afraid to try it if that's all you have. It's just a little handier on the post machine. We both have sewn them on flatbeds lots of times.
At this time I normally go ahead and put my 3 rows on, so I'll go ahead and finish the sewing on them. Then we'll move on to the trimming process. I've gone ahead and sewed all of them. I run 3 rows of stitching on them. Again, like I was telling you, I like them closer together. Now we're going to take and trim the vamp lining. As you can see, it's been sewed twice, where the outside's been sewed 3 times. I start at one corner, peel up the lining loose all the way back to the stitching. It's also why we use the rubber cement again, and I use just an average everyday lip knife. A lip knife, for those not in the shoe repair trade, is just a curved bladed knife with a shoulder on it that's sharp as well.
The new ones you get won't look like that. That one's had lots of tender years, and they get better with age.
Okay, I cut it at an angle, like this. I get as close to the stitching as I can without cutting the stitching. But I cut it at an angle so it makes for a smoother passage again for the foot.
Also, I like to use my Tandy trimmer that I've got from Tandy Leather. It's just kind of a blade with a groove down the center of it, then you kind of cut with the end of it rather than the side like a lip knife. And that works good for me. You do have to keep them sharp though for them to follow along good.
Okay, there we've got one lining that just magically matches the front. If you don't tell anybody how you do it, they're going to wonder how you sew so accurately. Go ahead and trim the other one. Again, I peel up the lining to the stitch line. You want a sharp knife for doing this so it doesn't look too ragged when the people look down inside your boots. It looks like a nice clean cut. This also works very well as a way to replace a lining if you get into boot rebuilding. You can tackle anybody's brand and put the lining back in exactly the same way as I've done here, and it works very, very well. Okay, we've got 2 of the fronts ready to go. Now we're going to trim the sides, trim the excess off of here. As I told you in the beginning with our paper patterns, the front of your pattern tapers in. Same size at the top, but gets narrower at the bottom. The back of your pattern gets wider at the bottom. Same size at the top, but grows at the bottom. I use just a metal straight edge. Follow the line of your top pattern. I just lay it on the edge of my top pattern and true it up like this. There's one side trimmed here, and this side isn't yet. At this time, I also, if I'm working with kangaroo or some light leather, I'll put a little bit of filler right in here. Go into about this area here, and I'll just lay an extra piece of leather in between the lining and the vamp cover, right here, so that it gives you a little extra strength here. If you're working with bull hide or you're working with some of the heavier leathers, you don't have to worry about it. But with kangaroo or kid skin or some of the very, very 1.5 ounce, 2 ounce leathers, you're going to want to double up that area for strength. Okay, there's one vamp ready to go, trimmed on both sides. Fold your tongue out of the way. I've cut I've cut the tip of a tongue off, getting in too big of a hurry, and grab your knife and go right on down, and all of a sudden the tongue was laying there all by itself. There's the other one. Your back pattern is a little more tricky because you've built this bellows into it that we were discussing earlier. The bellows down here and the bellows up here. So when you lay your top down, press her down flat. You may have to take the top and draw it this way to get it to lay flat, but lay her down flat and I'll show you what happens here. Again, follow your top line. There's a little bit of guesswork involved here. If it varies in and out a little bit, that's fine. Okay, if we were to be able to straighten this top up, you would notice that it comes down and flares out this way. That's normal, that's what you want. To the other side here. After you build a few pair of them, you'll realize from experience what you can trim off and what you can't. You don't want to trim off any more than what you've already trimmed on your pattern because you've put your heel measurement allowance in it already. It's a good way to end up making a pair of boots over. This measurement from here to here should remain constant with what you started with. Don't trim any more off of this area right here than you have to. There's a counter pattern. You can take, and I usually do, cut the rest of this counter that's hanging out down here. There we go. There's the back ready to go. Even with these razor knives, if you're using a good heavy counter, it's going to take 3 or 4 passes to get it cut all the way through. Trim off the bottom of your counter. There's the other one. Now, aside from some minor sanding that we have to do on the counter, we're ready to put your side welting on here. What I do now is I take them over on my finisher. I taper out approximately 1 inch up from the bottom on the counter, and I taper this out to about 1/8 of an inch thick. And I go in about this far, 1/2 inch or so on the sides. And I taper that out to about 1/8 of an inch thick. Less bulk that you have to fight with when you go to turn these boots right side out. So
you taper to the outside edge.
Taper to the outside, yes. This direction here and this direction here. So I'll go and do that now, and then we'll sew our side welting on and we're ready to close the boots. I've taken and I've sanded the edges down like we were speaking of, and it's about 1/8 of an inch thick now, up approximately 1 inch from the edge. And I've done the same with the edge here and gone in approximately 1/2 of an inch. So this is ready for assembly now. We're done with the backs. From here, we take the front part of our pattern again, and we're going to put our side welting on. Remember again, the side welding is the one that you're going to buy that that doesn't have the pinking on it. You don't need pinking for the side. I used the 3/8 side welting, and it has a little bit of thread in the middle, so you've got a little bit of a bump down the center. The 3/8 dimension works well with the way I've worked out these patterns. You lay it from bottom to top, or top to bottom, don't matter.
When you were cutting that by hand, how wide did you cut was it an inch?
No, I believe it was 3/4 of an inch. Why did I have to go back and look? It's been many years since I've done that.
Anyway, you want to end up with a 3/8 inch finished width.
Right. You need 4 of these. When I discovered this fine line address and discovered how cheap this was, it takes you a long time to make this stuff. I just couldn't see for that approximately $1.25 cost it adds to your boots, the time it took me to make this. I just soon buy it. From here we'll go over and sew our side welting on. You sew the side welting on with the open end of it to the outside. Remember that you're working backwards here. The finished end is going to be to the inside, so that when you turn your boot around, turn your seam around, the finished end is going to be out. So remember that your folded edge is going to be to the inside. Okay, we'll go over and sew these on. I do this again on a flatbed. This is the machine I have set up to sew my counters. This is fairly heavy sewing that you're going to be doing. And this counter machine set up to do the heavier sewing with the heavier thread and the needles just works well for it.
This isn't an important seam. It can be a little crooked as long as you keep your welt real straight.
Yeah, you want to keep your welt, the edge of your welt flush with the edge of your boot here. As far as sewing on the welt, you don't have to be too critical about that. But you want this seam here, your welt seam and your boot seam, you want them flush. You want them the same on the edge, because this is what you're going to guide off of to close your boot. So you want them flush on the edge. And I usually take and check my welting before I put it on, because when you buy it, you're going to find splices in it. And if I have any splices, I try and either put them under the pull tab or as close to the top of the boot as I can, so that I get more of a solid piece down in the flex area of the boot from about your ankle bone down. I'll sew one of these on here and give you an idea of what we've done.
That he pulled and helped it up over the thickness of that vamp. So sometimes it'll spin on you there, so you want to help it over that little hump.
Don't be afraid to help your machines, because even this compound feed one has trouble at times when you start talking about 3 or 4 different layers of leather. Okay, there we've got one side welt in place. You'll notice how straight I've kept the edge here. I try and sew as close to the edge as I can, so when I trim the excess off with the knife, I cut a great deal of the stitching off as well, but it's not necessary. Now you're going to have to start at the bottom of the next one to keep your welting running in the right direction if you have a roller foot on, because it's the only way you can sew. Same with this one. Okay, we've got all 4 of our side welts in place. I do take it this time and trim the excess off the top. Remember, this is going to be under your pull tabs, unless you're making pull holes, in which case you're going to want to dress this edge up just as nice looking as you can. There, we're ready to close the boot.